Hey friends, Megan Rose here, and today we're talking about two different types of isolation on the spiritual path. The one feeling like, okay, the world is too much, or being with, people or in society, or the way that you used to operate just doesn't work, that there's such a contrast between your energy and the world that it makes it really hard to be in the world. And so there's a pulling back and an isolation of using meditation and things to continue to connect with their soul connection. And then the other type of isolation is this isolation of thinking that our soul is what we embody to fully understand the path, and that's all that's needed. So we'll go into both, and I hope this can greatly support your path. If I would have known this in certain aspects of my journey, I would have saved years of not properly working with my Kundalini energy in a way that really served me. Because when we're not using our Kundalini energy, when it's only just being used for spiritual development, or if it's just like an isolated type of, you're just working within it, within the container of your spiritual anatomy, it doesn't actually allow you to process and burn karma thoroughly through your system. And so we'll explain all of this and go into it in this video today. So if we're talking about spiritual isolation, this idea that the world is a lot, it's intense, or that when you think about the Piscean Age and the Atlantean Age, they both had very similar energies. And most people who live in North America, so like the United States and Mexico, have Atlantean energy. They came from that time. And so there are certain glamours that we still carry with us on our spiritual path, especially just closing out the Piscean Age, which has very similar glamours of trying to isolate oneself to fully understand things, to if you think about like monks or nuns or, a scholar, someone who's looking through religious texts and scribing things. And, in those kind of ways, a person may say, in a Piscean Age, I understand there could be different ways of operating as a nun or a monk that have more service and interaction. But just for the example, within the Piscean Age, that there's this idea of you're going to take me away from my work. I can't have a family. I can't have a work life. I can't do all these different things or have these different distractions because I need to focus on this work. When there isn't friction around me, I can better connect with this work. I can better connect with the feeling of love and my soul and many other things on the path. That said, in the Aquarian Age, we move into a different energy. And right now, a different type of yoga is required of humanity. So yoga has, throughout the ages, been something that we describe as the way that we have yoke, that we have this communion between the personality and the soul. And we learn how to bring that into manifestation. And so at each time period for humanity, over millions of years, we had the Lemurian Age, we had the Atlantean Age, and we have the age that we're moving into right now that requires a different type of yoga. It's a different type of time. We've developed for the Hatha yoga. We've cleared, and the Laya yoga, Kundalini yoga, we've cleared our meridians for lifetimes, our nadis for lifetimes. And if you've had Kundalini awakening, you've probably had, for many people, there's this experience where Kundalini does go through and make it past the crown, and that you're able to experience different samadhi states, different enlightenment states, just at a click of it's like a light switch. That light switch also gets turned off because there's other aspects that need to be balanced in one system. But your nadis and meridians, like, you don't need to prepare and keep focusing on those things. There can be benefits, stress benefits, hatha yoga and things that are beneficial. But if we're talking about the yogas that we do to support our spiritual path, then we're talking more about yogas that develop our ability in this day and age. And so there's yogas that we focus on that develop the higher mind, because your soul resides. One of the planes that you can access your soul on is through the higher mental plane. So there's yogas that focus on that. It's not so much the yoga that you think about when you're doing like downward facing dog yoga. It encompasses many different branches. And then we talk about yogas that incorporate the different fires, more fires than just the friction of Kundalini. We're talking about your soul fire and eventually a monadic fire that you're bringing in to support your path and process, and how you orient yourself on multidimensional levels of your system to receive that energy. Well, because of all these things, in addition to the Aquarian energy of this age. We're no longer in the Piscean era of you doing meditation for hours and hours, isolated in a cave without distractions. The way that we're set up right now is that actually through service, and service shows up in many different ways. Service isn't just like serving the homeless or something. It's not just, there's a soul-aligned service that we're learning to connect with, something that is aligned with your soul calling and the way that you use spiritual energies, the way that you ground spiritual energies. And yes, that's also very tangible in the world, but then it's also multidimensional and spiritual too. There's multiple ways that we work with energies to support our soul-aligned notes and service being expressed into the world. When you do that, that means that you're operating in the world. You're actually going into friction in your spiritual path and process, and you're learning how to stabilize in that. I don't know how many spiritual people I've seen that can't operate in society, or that they develop so much spiritually that they end up being homeless in their next lives because they can't handle the everyday life. They can't handle, being able to actually physically take care of themselves. That's not what the spiritually enlightened person, that's not like what we're aiming for. That's not a development that allows you then to be of service in the world. What our world desperately needs is that you are balanced, that you're able to handle higher influxes of energy that are coming in, but you're able to translate those energies in very tangible ways into the world. For instance, say that you have mastered your astral body, your emotional body, not just mastered it as in, oh, I'm able to suppress emotions. Through our Rose Awakening private membership, I actually teach people how to transmute the different patterns in their system so that their astral body can be more like a calm lake. And so that when higher energies come in, you're not being flared with all these emotional inputs that then you're taking days to process through, or sometimes even weeks to process through. And I know there's a lot of spiritual people right now that are, sleeping a lot and they're processing so much. And just to know that that is just a stage. The hope is that, in your spiritual path and process, we're not just managing the symptoms of the stage that you're in, that you're learning how to get to the next stage. And you do learn to get to the next stage through integrating into the real world, not by further isolating yourself, even though there are stages where that feels more comfortable and that feels necessary. But it's not something that you stay in forever. That there is a point where by integrating into society, your spiritual awakening, that you're able to better orient your energy, process energies, and work multidimensionally because you're able to hold spiritual light into the tension of the world. Or if somebody is a mother and they're able to hold that spiritual light while they're raising children, their soul light, they're able to, make dinner as a prayer, or maybe somebody's a coder and they're able to stay connected with their soul and the very foundational decisions that they're making every step along the way in how that impacts algorithms and many other things. Or maybe you're somebody who's in leadership and it's about right relations in the world and modeling that in the world. Our world doesn't need more people in caves removed from the world. I know that there's this thought that, okay, there's all these monks and such, or people that are doing mantra for the world, and they're clearing so much of the karma, the kind of top piece of, what everybody is swimming in, and that's so painful. And not to discount that, and there needs to be an and. It's like, yes, we pray, we support the world, we invoke really strong energies, we work with very strong energies, and there needs to be ways that we're integrated so that the world can move into the Aquarian Age without the whole world having to be disconnected from a society that works. We're meant to make a society that works. And that takes you being a leader and somebody who's able to work with these energies in very tangible ways. So the other thing to address that I see quite a bit is that people will say that they're just meant to learn from their soul, that they don't need support on the path. And in contemplating this, because even my own mother said this, love you, Mom, if you're watching, but it really informed me like, wow, I hear this so much. And I think some of this comes from the challenges that people have felt with religion or different spiritualities over the years, where there was somebody trying to be an authority, wanting submission, And so people are like, no, I'm not submitting to anyone outside of myself, which is a really important thing. Is sovereignty of your energy, discernment is one of the, like when we talk about Rose Awakening and the private membership, one of the main core things is developing discernment. Discernment is huge. So when we're talking about these really small things right now, these are two small glamours on the path, but they tend to be very common. Again, this one that in order to develop on the path, we need to be isolated, that we can't be in relationship or that we can't be in work in the world. That's a glamour. Another glamour on the path is the one that we're speaking about right now, that everything is just meant to be sourced from within and just in oneself, rather than realizing that the way that we actually grow spiritually and the way that this is set up in the ashram, so if we think about our lives multidimensionally, maybe see a physical being right here, we have my etheric layer, we have my astral layer of my emotional body, my lower mental body, my higher mental body, we have the Buddhic plane, the Atmic plane. Within different planes of existence, we also have different spiritual places that as you develop spiritually, as you're able to make connections with these places. This is not channeling. This is being able to connect with like your spiritual home where you are serving. There's different beings that have developed over time. So say if you think of a really common example, especially where I am in the United States and kind of the centric, this isn't about Christianity in any way. That said, when we talk about Jesus or the Christ. So Jesus being someone who on the cross took the fourth initiation, and the Christ being the Lord Maitreya, or a being who overshadowed Jesus as a master, also took a higher initiation at the same time that Jesus took the initiation on the cross. There's many beings throughout time that are higher initiates and are still a part of the earth service chain, supporting the evolving aspects of humanity and earth. In society, we have regular people who are just out there living in the world, living in the material world, not really realizing that there's way, way, way more available to them. Then we have people who are starting to move towards, say, higher values and aspirations in the world. Then we have people who are starting to really apply the values, those pieces of living life very purposefully with great intentionality. This isn't just about mysticism. There's some pieces in here that we could touch on, but we won't today. Just for the sake of this example, to say that there's different stages that as a person is able to stabilize, the physical things that would pull them, lust or, to not be able to control oneself when it comes to how they physically take care of themselves, or, lack of discipline, things like that. That people start to have mastery at the lowest levels of things like that, but then eventually mastery in their emotions, their fear, their hate, their separativeness, so they start to create matter in their experience that is of a higher quality. And then same with their mental field, but then also understanding glamours and illusions on the path and many, many other things. And in all of this, there are pieces that we build out our spiritual anatomy to have further connections beyond just this physical plane reality. And again, this is beyond mysticism or channeling or psychism as well. But as a person spiritually develops, they have the opportunity to participate, even though they're in a physical body, within the different rings of an ashram that they're associated with. So the master that there's a karmic connection with, or that there's a connection with. In the soul group too, the many people that you're working with on the earth plane who are also associated with that work. Now, some people, they work in the world and they are doing incredible work in the world, and they're not aware of that connection. And that's totally okay. Some people will learn at night in that realm, but not remember it. And then as people grow spiritually, they'll remember more and they'll be admitted into different parts of learning. But in order to even start to even understand the path, if I didn't have the miracle of people who understood soul embodiment, and that my soul helped direct me to be guided to connect with these different teachers, real life teachers, people on the physical plane, the people who have had a certain amount of soul embodiment, understanding that there's so many distractions on the path, and that the only path is really your soul embodiment, your higher self. You're more your higher self than you are your personality. Your personality comes and goes, life after life after life, and your soul continues to hold the information of every single lifetime. So you're more your soul than your personality. But without my connecting with these teachers, I would have been pulled into so much glamour, and I was pulled into a lot of glamour. And for me, I kept going down all these different paths, and I wanted to know the full extent of them. I wanted to understand all the energies in them, all the things that didn't seem supportive or helpful, or that seemed like off in certain ways. And I wanted to understand them fully. But it wasn't until I started to walk this path that I continually felt that soul peace. There's a lot within this, but what I'm trying to say is that there's a glamour that I hear so much, like I was saying, that I heard from my mom. Sorry for these tangents. I keep going around in circles here. And that you're just supposed to source everything from your soul, or like within, that you're not supposed to have teachers on the path. There is so much glamour, there's so much illusion on the path that you absolutely need mirrors from people who are even just a smidgen ahead of the trail, who've been able to go through certain glamours to be able to shine the light on things. So the reason why I went through all these dynamics of an ashram and understanding kind of this brief overview of, and very vague here, on how there's developments or stages. At every single level, the soul brings in a teacher for you. At every single level. You might be working in group work, you might be, have somebody that really comes in that's supposed to support this next stage of your path. This is the exact same modeling of how this works in the ashram. The master has someone who is very close to the master that's able to teach. And when the master is doing other work, planetary work, service that's outside of just that teaching, that disciple will teach others in the ashram. Those other disciples will teach other disciples in the world, in the ashram. It's the same. You were meant to learn. Like, it's the craziest thing. That we would think we would be on the spiritual path and that we're just going to understand it through watching a bunch of YouTube videos. Like, you're meant to learn from other people on the path. And there's so many nuances, and there's things that happen multidimensionally that are beyond just your taking in information from the person. There's things that need to occur. So, for example, when I was doing an esoteric group a few years back, there were a bunch of us that had been in that container for a while, and a new person came in, and it was literally by them coming in, and it was just a Zoom space, but all of our souls had been creating this powerful container. That new person that came in, what we had embodied was literally burning karma in their system. And this is a huge thing to realize when we're talking about the Aquarian Age and focusing group energies in really powerful ways. We're not just talking about one person that's enlightened, that's able to wield a certain amount of willpower. We're talking about group work, group love that is so strong that it catalyzes a person's spiritual path and process, because as you become more soul aligned, as you become more balanced, as you purposely really do the real grounded soul work, the nuances and understandings, not just even the energy, those things end up being a gift to others. There's so much more multidimensionally going on here. So I want to take a moment to talk about the Rose Awakening private membership. Obviously, that's how I continue to be able to teach and love and show up. And a big piece of, like when we were talking earlier about how there's this Piscean and Atlantean energy about, okay, I just gain all these energies for oneself. In many, many ways, that's like a king who's collecting all the riches for themselves, all the labor, all the fruits of that labor for themselves. In this age, we're meant to pass things on. And when we pass things on, like when I'm using Rose Awakening, this private membership, as a way to pass along the gifts that I feel like are the most incredible gifts that I've received in this life. Absolutely, hands down, the most incredible gifts I've ever received. That is what this private membership is designed for. A place to pass on these gifts, that they're not just kept in isolation, that you can also see the map of the path, that you can feel really confident on where you are on the path and knowing exactly what are the next stages and practices that you need to do to support your path and process without feeling confused, like you're doing so many different things, but you're not really sure what's moving you forward. And to continue to feel like you're processing so much all the time, or that you're not able to integrate into the world, to know that there are paths forward and there's way to support you energetically in doing so. The whole point of all of this, yes, feeling good is nice, but it's not all about just feeling good, because then we would just be meditating on peace all the time. And we wouldn't actually be grounding the embodiment of our soul's purpose in this world and how we work in connection with the ashram, how we work in connection with the higher plan for all of humanity. If we were just focusing on peace, or maybe some other things, maybe if we were just focusing on how to gain more psychic powers, or use these cities, or astral travel, or twin flame energy, or all these different things in all these different ways, we would miss the greatest opportunity of our lives, which impacts even future lives. But that said, we can still talk about your twin flame experiences. We can still contextualize that. We can still support you through those energies, because those experiences are important. It's important for you to understand what's occurring in your system, what's occurring on the astral plane when that happens, or on the mental plane. We can still talk about the symptoms that you're having with Kundalini, and being unable to handle some of the energies sometimes, or the great despair and depression that occurs when you have that energy and then it goes away. And you wonder, like, what did I do wrong? What am I not doing right on the path? Those are all things that we continue to address with each other. That's what the space is for. This is a small space that, there's curriculum. I send you out books. I send you out a booklet and then a journal. The journal is meant to support the building of the higher mind and integrating different aspects of your journey so you can access the higher mental plane and access more fully your soul. I am so confident about this journey because I have worked with so many people over the years who've had Kundalini awakening. When I was working with the nonprofit that I was with, there were over 40 people who've had different spiritual awakening experiences, and we were constantly working in group work together, trying to understand what the most efficient ways would be for humanity to ground and embody these things in a way to, again, perpetuate service and the healing of the world and the challenges that are going on right now. Through this, and through my sticking with the path and with the facilitation that I've had, I've seen not only myself, but many other people be able to make different thresholds of the path. And there was a time I didn't know that those thresholds existed. I didn't know that they were possible. And to me, that is one of the most empowering things. It's not just about embodying more light or becoming enlightened. It's about learning how to integrate these things so you can operate in day-to-day life in multidimensional ways that are, I just don't see these things talked about very often, creators online or in other places. So anyway, my kids go back to school in like 2 weeks. And so I'm really excited to open up this next round of Rose Awakening and to support moving into these next stages that are most soul aligned for folks. And so this is the thing, like for some people, there's going to be a soul resonance with me or maybe something else. But to keep your eyes open, your heart open to that. And that is a part of the yoga that is possible and what is needed for us right now. That yoga of being a chalice that is open to receiving the higher spiritual impressions that are meant to come through, that we're meant to work with. I've had people in the program tell me that I should be charging way, way more for the program. It is a private membership association, so the way that we work is that you would fill out an alignment form. Not every single person is accepted in the program because the group field is really important. So we would make sure that there's an alignment between us. This isn't like some big crazy thing. Like I think some people think that in order to be really spiritual, that you have to have all these mystical experiences going on. Sometimes people will use different practices to open up mystical experiences in past lives. They'll use Kundalini practices to bypass, instead of going through the central channel, they'll go bypass Kundalini in different nadis and then open up different brain centers or abilities. But those things can it can take people sometimes lifetimes to try to come back from that, to try to get back on the straight and narrow path, quite literally. Where there's other people who are practicing such discernment, they're practicing love and compassion and patience, and they're showing up in a way spiritually that is very grounded, but they might not be having all these mystical experiences. So, sometimes our understanding of who's really spiritually developed isn't actually true. there's a lot of illusions around those things. For instance, say if you were to work in an ashram, do you have enough stability in your emotional body, in your mental body, that it's not creating so much upheaval or pain, or where you're using practices that are disrupting to the group field? There's things to consider about your energy and how you contribute to the world around you. And yeah, so sometimes it's people that don't seem as mystical that are more able to move along the path because they're more grounded. So anyway, we do that alignment form, and then we can talk about what it looks like moving forward and answer, of course, any questions that you might have, and see, how do you want to be best supported over this next year? What would your life look like over the next 5-10 years if you did implement very specific practices to embody your soul and create a tangible balance on multidimensional levels of your system? What would it look like if you didn't, right? If you made it this far? First of all, I have not been hearing from people in the comments, so you did make it this far. If you could say anything, just let me know that there's people out there. Are there people listening to this? You could even say where you're commenting from, where you're watching from, anything, if there's anything that you gained from this that you feel like was supportive, you could put that in there, or just like the video. But just to give a little bit of feedback for what I am putting out there, again, it really helps me energetically to know, because when people comment, right, you feel the energy, and it can help me orient to how I communicate about things. Instead of just communicating to a wall, I can feel the energy that I'm communicating to, and then I can be more precise in how I'm doing these videos. And so if we start to participate in a group field where people are saying, oh yeah, even the simplest things, yeah, I'm tuning in from London or wherever it may be, those things allow us to start to feel into, okay, what energies are present? How can we speak more clearly, more directly to the people that are watching these videos? So I look forward to hopefully hearing from you, and I'm wishing you so many blessings. Take care.